sisters, grace to you and peace from God our Father and from our risen Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. I want to start this morning with a little bit of a pop quiz. I've got a picture up there. I want you to try and guess what that is a picture of. And as I say that, don't even try. Is that a picture of your leftover egg souffle that you had this morning? No, it is not. Is that a picture of what it looks like when my dog gets a hold of the marshmallow peeps this morning? No, it is not. That, my friend, is a picture of Mycobacterium vaccae. Please tell me, in all of your life of coming to church on Easter Sunday, have you ever heard a sermon start with bacteria?
No.
Never. But today, we're gonna. Why? Mycobacterium vaccae. This is actually the strain of bacteria that's in dirt that scientists have said is actually good for you. We have heard the old saying that it's good to get out and dig in the dirt, and scientifically it has been proven to be so. Why? Because digging in the dirt gets you into contact with Mycobacterium vaccae, and scientifically that has been proven to be very healthy for you. The old saying goes, take time to smell the roses. And that isn't just an old saying. That is scientifically true. It is a good thing for you to smell the roses. In fact, there's even a whole branch of therapy called horticulture therapy that has emerged since scientists have begun to really look at the benefits of getting outside into your yard and getting dirty. And what they know is that digging around in the dirt, getting in contact with Mycobacterium vaccae is actually linked to things like lower blood pressure, better mental stability. All kinds of health benefits literally come because you go out in your garden and you dig around in the dirt. And that's what we've got. Digging in the dirt, gardening, and a bacteria that becomes such a blessing. Very early on the first day of the week, Mark said, while it was still dark and just before sunrise, a group of women went out to a tomb. It had been a long, coming up on 72 hours. They had gone through excruciating mental anguish and pain because their closest friend had been trumped up through a kangaroo court, had been sentenced to death, had been put to death, and now they were going out after the required waiting time and resting time to finish preparing his body for final rest. As we know the story, they go out and they see that the stone is rolled away. And the women may be tired, absolutely mentally exhausted from the previous few days, not sure they're seeing what they see. But once they do, what do they discover? The gospel writers tell us that there were a couple of angels. A young man, in particular, was sitting where Jesus' body had been, and he tells them, don't be alarmed, he has risen. Good news. A young man. Get this, though. A young guy in dazzling white sitting in a tomb. Does this make sense? No. Sitting in a tomb, and they show up, and he goes, hey, don't be alarmed, he has risen. And how do the women react, my friends? Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. And Mark tells us they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. That Greek word for afraid, phobios, where we get our English word phobia. They were absolutely so seized with alarm, Mark tells us, that once they heard the good news from that young man, what did they do? They seized up, they freaked out, they ran away, and they said not a word to anyone. Is this the Easter story that we're used to? This isn't the good news. These women are told good news, but this is not the way that the good news is supposed to be reacted to. And what's interesting is once we go to John's Gospel, it's much the same. Mary goes to the tomb. She sees that the stone has been rolled away. She runs back, tells the disciples, goes back to the tomb, and she is encountered by two angels who ask her why she's weeping. Guys, here's the deal. If two angels are encountering you, asking you questions, wouldn't you kind of pay attention to the fact that these are angels? Wouldn't you sit there and go, whoa, something crazy's going on here, right? Nope. How does Mary respond to the angelic host talking to her and telling her that Jesus isn't there? She sobs. She absolutely breaks down and sobs. And what does she do? She simply answers their question. They've taken my Lord away and we don't know where they've laid him. Mary, you're talking to angels. No. For Mary, the mother of Jesus, Salome, the other Mary, mother of Joseph, Mary Magdalene, all these ladies are encountered by the heavenly host on Easter Sunday, and their reaction to that is fear, trembling, and not saying a word to anybody. And so what changes to take this story from where the gospel writers really leave it with us to where we are today and why we're here to celebrate? Supposing him to be a gardener, Jesus said to her, Mary. And there it is. That's what changes. Mary, in the midst of tears, absolutely filling her eyes to the point where she can't see straight. In the midst of unfathomable grief that she can't think straight. Same thing for the other Marys and for Salome. And what ends up happening is, supposing a guy who's asking her yet more questions about why she's sad, she supposes him for a gardener. And then he says her name. And my friends, that changes everything right there. What changed? Guys, what changed for all of these women is that it wasn't enough for them to simply hear the news that Jesus had been risen from the dead. Hearing from other people that Jesus had been risen from the dead resulted in what? In them being seized with fear and telling no one. It wasn't enough for them simply to be told that Jesus was alive. That didn't do it. And it wasn't enough even for them to be told that Jesus was alive from angels. That didn't sway them. What it was that did sway them was what? When Mary mistook Jesus for, of all things, for being a gardener. My friends, what changed on that Easter Sunday for Mary Magdalene and for all of the other disciples, the other Marys and Salome, is when Jesus himself dug in the dirt with Mary. In the midst of her pain, in the midst of her grief, in the midst of her tears, in the midst of everything that she had going on that day, when Jesus stood there with her and dug in that dirt, and himself said to her, Mary, everything changed in an instant. John tells us that immediately upon hearing her name, Jesus digging in the dirt, how does Mary respond? Rabboni! It's all been lifted. Everything has changed in an instant right there. Half a dozen weeks ago, we started this series. And we started in the dirt. We started in the dirt about 22 miles north of Jerusalem, a town called Bethel. This is where God's people had built a temple years and years before. This is the site of where the temple at Bethel had been built, and we talked a half dozen weeks ago about how this is what it looks like today. It's a pile of rocks, it's a bunch of dirt. And it became that way in large part because what? Throughout history, it had been a very, very important spot in the life of God's people. Abraham and Lot had separated at Bethel. Abraham had taken one chunk of what God had promised. Lot took the other. It eventually became a place where Elisha, the prophet, had been jeered by a host of youth. Some bears came along and took care of things then. It had also been a place where Jacob had named it Bethel. That is, house of God. It had become a place where, because of some friction going on between God's leaders, false gods had been set up there. People were encouraged to worship those false gods, and it started to fall apart. As we talked about what it means for this particular Bethel here to be the house of God, we've been talking these last half dozen weeks about what does it mean for us as Bethel to be the L. What are those L things that we're called to be? And we talked about what it means for Bethel to be the lambent, that is, to be a people of grace and goodwill. We talked about what it is for Bethel to be the lair, that is, for us as people to be the resting place where people can go before they ever come into this building and sit in a pew. We are the resting place before the building is the resting place. We were talking a couple weeks ago about be the laboratory, to be an inviting place where smart people can gather together and explore what does it actually mean that God has given us these immeasurable gifts of faith and science and reason. And how do those things work together in a way that they can complement each other, especially as it relates to our faith in Jesus Christ. And then on this Easter Sunday, we are being called to be the life. And that is, to be the life is to do more than to simply retell the story that we're here to celebrate today. To be the life is for us to dig in the dirt with people. It is to encounter people in the midst of their griefs, their joys, their tears, their fear, to get dirty with them. Because, my friends, that's what changed everything for the Marys, for Salome, for the disciples. It was when Jesus himself dug in the dirt with Mary, that's when everything changed. And for us as Bethel, that's what it means for us to be the light. To dig in the dirt with people. To go about and take time to smell the roses with them. Willis, God bless him, just reminded me this morning, 63 years today that he's been a member of this congregation. Praise God. That's cool. Take time to smell that rose. Take time with people to work with them and pull the weeds in their life. Take time to be with them and dig in the dirt. And yet this is what it means, my friends, to be the life on this Easter Sunday. We are called to do what Jesus did with Mary, to dig in the dirt, but not to leave people there. Amen? We are called to yield to Jesus, having him work through us. To do what? To be the gardener in people's lives. My friends, as we stand here this morning, I wrote this on Thursday. And now as we stand here this morning, brothers and sisters halfway around the world are back in the midst of unfathomable grief. More than 200 of our brothers and sisters who are sitting in a place just like this have rejoined the Lord eternally today because of their faith in Jesus Christ. My friends, I don't know how to put my head around this. This is digging in the dirt. This is what it means for us, not just to talk about the story, but to be with our brothers and sisters in the midst of their joy, their grief, their pain. And it is in that, my friends, that Jesus absolutely changed the life 180 degrees for a woman who was in severe grief. He changed the life for the rest of his disciples. He's changed the life for the rest of the world, including, my friends, these brothers and sisters who are grieving in Sri Lanka today. That's what we're called to be the light, to dig in the dirt. And why? Because scientifically, it's healthy, it's good. And that's what the Lord has called us to do. The Lord be with you.